Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have ourselves another of the brand new 2024 Schleich figures, and this one is one that I was actually really quite excited about. We have the Bajadasaurus, and I was excited about it because there are so few models out there of this species. Now, it's not exactly an old species, it's fairly new, so it's understandable why we don't have all that many. But this one, again, was a pretty interesting species choice from Schleich, so I was pretty excited to see how they did on it. And the original promo images made it look half decent, but in hand, I will say, the skin texture is, for some reason, not very well done. It looks awkward and ugly, and that is definitely a bummer for the figure. I mean, the head sculpt looks okay, but I'm not a huge fan of the paint they've used on the head sculpt. There are just a few issues with it overall. It's definitely a bit better than you see for most Schleich sauropods, but it is by no means a, fantastic interpretation of this species. So what we're going to do is jump straight to a closer look, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Bajadasaurus, you can see it looks okay for what it is. It's definitely not a masterpiece, but it also isn't terrible. But the problem for me is the fact that they've painted the face so dark that you really have a hard time making out any of the actual fine detail. In fact, it's so dark it's even hard to kind of make out the mouth and everything for the figure, which is definitely a downside for me. I really think that they should have given it a little bit of a different color, or at the very least maybe a bit of a lighter tone so we could still actually see the detailing of the face. You can also see like a rubber seam moving right up there through the mouth of the dinosaur. And then again, when we take a look at it over here, I feel like you can kind of make out the face a little bit better, but it again isn't really great. There's also a little paint scuff there in the nostril area. And then if you move up here, you can also see again that seam runs all the way up through the center of the head. So that is just, ugly altogether when it comes to that. For some reason, I don't even know if it's a seam, it's just a little extra. You can see it kind of run up the entire underside of the throat, up through the mouth, and up over the top of the head right there, which is definitely an annoyance, especially when you have this white tone up there on the top of the head to be just kind of obliterated with that extra rubber right there. You can see the eyes are painted fairly decently. They also have a nice gloss coat, so that is a plus for the figure. As you move up here into the top of our Bajadasaurus, probably the most unique area of the dinosaur is kind of interesting looking. It's not the greatest sculpt I've ever seen, but it's not the worst, and you can see they have given it at least a little variation of color as they've painted it out with a gray and then kind of dry brushed a lighter tone. Looks like maybe a very light gray or a white over it. But the only problem is I feel like it's maybe a little too intense when it comes to that dry brushing. The detailing in that area, though, does look pretty nice. It obviously softens up the detail as you get closer to the tips, but for the most part it looks okay. And then as you move down here into the neck, you can see again, we do have a dark wash present, and we also have like a yellowish brown tone for the primary body color. And again, the skin texture looks a little bit strange to me. It doesn't look too bad here in the neck, though it's mostly just kind of like awkward lines sort of sculpted into the dinosaur rather than real skin texture or like real scale detail or anything like that. You can kind of see like some scales as you lead up here to the top right in this area, but once you move down into the primary area of the neck, you can see the detailing is fairly generic overall. The dark wash does help to highlight the detail, but the detail isn't nice enough that it really should have been highlighted. We do have a lighter tone here on the underside of the neck and the underside of the throat of the Bajadasaurus, running only in the throat area. But you can also see again that we have like that dark wash present, and again highlighting some of the cracks and crevices of that skin texture. We also have some ridges moving along the spinal column of the dinosaur. There's like a grayish tone that kind of follows along those ridges. And again, you can see the skin texture looks really, really bad in my opinion. As you move down into the body, it just looks super, super awkward. And it's unfortunate because the figure overall, I feel like could have looked pretty decent, but the skin texture is just so awful on this. Like, I don't know what they were going for. I don't even know what to compare it to. I've never really seen skin texture this weird looking before, especially not on a sauropod. You can kind of see the shoulder a little bit. You can also sort of make out some muscle definition as you move down the front of the leg. I do like the fact that we have like a little bit of hanging skin here off of the back of the leg moving down, almost elephant-like as far as that goes. You can kind of make out the elbow and everything. And again, it looks okay as far as the actual general sculpt of the leg goes. It's the skin texture that really takes me out of this figure. You can kind of see the skin, scrunching up here as both legs push into the stomach region. Again, that dark wash really highlighting all of the detail. And again, the yellowish brown I think looks okay. Definitely wasn't a bad choice as far as the coloration goes. Not very flashy by any means, but then again, I don't really expect sauropods to have the flashiest coloration to them. You can see the rear leg also sports some muscle definition, but again, it's not overly defined. It doesn't look terrible as far as that goes. You can kind of see like a calf muscle or something like a calf muscle right here. I don't really know what the heck's going on there. Again, the rear leg looks interesting. You have the nails painted with a darker variation of a gray. You can kind of make out the toes and stuff. And then as you move back up here into the tail and you lead out through the length of the tail, you continue to see those ridges following along the back of the dinosaur. Again, nothing really too crazy going on when it comes to the coloration or the skin texture, though I think the skin texture starts to look a little bit better as you move out into the tail, but still by no means does it look great. And then you can see the tail does transition to that darker gray for the tip of the tail, and we have like the ridges running over the top and under the underside of the tail. As you lead out to that point, you continue to have that lighter tone moving along the underside of the Bajadasaurus as well as you move along there. And then if we take a look at the opposing side again, you can see that it's definitely a very striking looking figure. I can absolutely see kids being very interested in this one once they see it in store. I feel like kids will probably grab it because it's such a different looking sauropod. It's just unfortunate that it does have such an awkward look to the overall texturing. You're not going to see too much in the way of difference from one side to the other. The head is slightly turned, ever so slightly, toward us on this side, but the skin texture continues to look pretty much the same. Again, I don't think the skin texture looks super terrible in the neck region or the tail. It's once you lead into the body that it then becomes very awkward looking, and it even kind of looks, I think, a little better on this side compared to this side. I don't know why. It just for some reason looks a little bit better to me, but still by no means is it good. It's very strange looking. I don't even know, like I said, I don't know how to explain the awkward appearance to the skin texture of this Bajadasaurus, but you can see the legs are spread further apart on this side, so definitely a little bit more of the stomach shining on this side. You can definitely make out the musculature of the front leg over here. Even though it's not overly defined, you can make out that muscle definition actually does look pretty decent. And then you lead out again through the length of the tail. You have some decent length for the tail of the Bajadasaurus as well. So it is a figure that I had not high hopes for, considering it's a Schleich release, but I was expecting it to be one of my favorites for this year. And unfortunately, it falls flat if you ask me, but it is still at least pretty cool to see a Bajadasaurus in the Schleich line regardless. As far as a size goes, from the snout to the tail, about 10.5 inches roughly, I would say, or around 27 centimeters, somewhere in that vicinity. And then for a height, you are looking at a hair over 3 3/4 inches, maybe even just shy, actually, of about 4 inches or around 10 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Golovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day human being next to our Bajadasaurus. And you can see it does have a fairly decent size to it. It's not massive or anything, but it's also not really all that small. We've also got a comparison with a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus, again showing you that it's, not huge, but also not tiny. It's a fairly, I would say, a decent size overall, probably like a medium-sized sauropod. And then a few more randoms filling the screen, as we have the Schleich Diabloceratops, the Safari LTDU Tyrannus, and Collect Day Deluxe Dimetrodon for another comparison. Now, I do actually have the Collect Day Bajadasaurus, but for some reason I don't know exactly where I put it, so I'm just going to bring in a few random sauropods, the first of which is the How Long Good Ampulosaurus, a figure that has recently come out that I know a lot of people were a big fan of. I felt like would be a good one to bring in for a comparison. We've also got the Collect Day Daxia Titan here next to our Bajadasaurus again from Schleich, as well as the Collect Day Argentinosaurus stepping in for a comparison. Now we've got the Collect Day version of the Ampulosaurus next to our Bajadasaurus. And then one final comparison between two very similarly sized sauropods. We have the Bajadasaurus next to the Collect Day Brontosaurus, just to again show you that if you do have that Collect Day Brontosaurus, you'll have a pretty good idea of the size of this Schleich Bajadasaurus. So this is again another very interesting release, another very interesting addition to the Schleich 2024 lineup, but I can't say it's another impressive one. It is unfortunate that the figure has turned out so awkward because it did have some people interested in it, of course myself included, because we have so few Bajadasaurus figures out there, and it kind of looked somewhat promising from the original promo images, but this is again one of those instances where it's very obvious you can never truly trust a promo image because the figure in hand could look far different than what you are originally shown, and that's definitely the case with this Bajadasaurus. I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world because it really isn't, but you know, it's nowhere near as bad as their Morose, but it still by no means is great, and the biggest setback for this one is the skin texture. The skin texture looks extremely awkward, does not in any way, shape, or form look like what I would expect the skin texture to look like on a sauropod, again, or specifically the Bajadasaurus. It looks very strange. I don't know what they were going for. I don't know why they sculpted it the way they did, because otherwise I think the sculpt looks fairly okay, like when it comes to the overall general appearance. And even if you move pretty far back and kind of take a look at it from a distance and you don't notice how weird looking the skin texture is, I feel like it looks all right, but again, even if they had given it better skin texture, it still wouldn't have been a great figure. It just would have been a pretty decent one. But the skin texture is, of course, the worst part about it. I'm also not a huge fan of the darker paint in the face because I feel like it's just a little too dark and, you know, draws away the details, kind of hides the details, I think, on the face. So it makes it a little bit harder to really appreciate the actual sculpt in that area. The paint is okay. It's nothing really to brag about. It does have that trademark Schleich dark wash, which I do like, but the fact that the skin texture looks so ugly doesn't really allow the dark wash to, again, do it any favors. But the coloration, I feel like, is something that could be perceived as nice and natural overall, something I could see on a dinosaur like this. As a whole, it's definitely not the worst thing in the world, but it is by no means a fantastic release from Schleich, and that's something that can be often said about most of their figures, I would say. But if you are interested in purchasing this for yourself, I will include a link in the description to where I grabbed mine from on Amazon. So make sure you check that link, go pick this up if you'd like to own it, and also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.